Hi class, I wanted to make a short video on understanding the difference between array and array lists, and then also the fact that we can make arrays or array lists that have objects within. And so I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about this. If anything to clarify, we did talk a little bit about this in class, and I want to make this video to reveal some of this, because you should expect one question on the AP exam to be about array or array lists, and I want to make sure that you're prepared for that. So why don't we start by making first the student class that we worked on in class, public class student. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to make this video, well, definitely under 45 minutes. We'll say that we'll keep it simple for now, but we'll say that a student has a name, so public string name. This is the instance variables. I'll make a comment here. Now, what is true about the instance variables? So what is an instance variable? It's a variable that belongs to the student class, and so you will most likely initialize a name. So I'll write here initialized when a student, and I'll capitalize the S, student is instantiated or created. So I'll write the terminology here that we actually use here. So we'll say that a student has a name, and that can be just full name, doesn't matter. And we'll also say that a student has an age, and then finally we'll say that a student has a grade level, which we can either make a string or an int. I'll make it a string, so I'll say it here, grade level. Now I want to initialize these variables, but I don't want to initialize them. I don't want to hard code the name. For example, I do not want to put this right here, because every student that I make is gonna have this name, Alex Ortiz, because I'm hard coding the name here, and I don't want to do that. And so what I would do here is I would just leave it blank, and I would let the constructor initialize the instance variables. That's the reason why it's called the constructor. Remember that constructor always is public, and it has the same name as the name of the class. And in this case, we want to initialize 3 variables: name, age, and grade level. So I'll include 3 parameters. First will be a string n, short for name. Second will be an integer a, short for age. And then finally, the third is going to be a string g, short for grade level. And then I can initialize the variable's name is going to be whatever n is. Age is going to be whatever a is, and grade level is going to be whatever g is, right? That's the job of the constructor. We'll make some setter and getter methods really quick. Public getter method returns a value. So in this case, I'll return a string, and I'll call it get name, just in case somebody wants to access, wants to know what the name of this student is. We'll say return. Oh, there's no parameters needed here, and I'm going to put this in just one line of code to save myself space, because this method just returns the value of name. And I can just copy this, and I'll do also a method that gets the age, returns the age, and then a method that returns grade level, which I'm going to abbreviate grade level. And that returns a string, and we'll call it grade level. And for now, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to compile here. I'm going to save, and I'm going to save here in a new folder that I've made to try to keep this all together, called arrays and ArrayLists. It's called student.java. Good. Now, let me make now a new class that's gonna test all this code. So I would go here, public class. We'll call this a list of students. In this list of students, I'm gonna have my main method. I'm gonna compile to then save this in the same location that I just saved my previous code, and it's in the folder arrays and ArrayLists. Come on, there we go. Okay, now before I start talking about arrays and ArrayLists, I want to talk about making a student, because that's what we do in Java. We use classes like the student class. We use it. Now there's a lot of stuff in here that I can use. The one thing I don't have that I guess maybe I should code is I want a method that, well, I can get the name, age, and grade level, but what if I just want to print all the information for a particular student? There is a special method called the ToString method that returns a string, requires no parameters, and it returns basically whatever you want it to return. And let's say that I want to return something like name plus whatever name is plus, and we can just come down here. I'll put a enter key, the escape sequence for the return carriage, so that puts a new line, and we'll do age plus age. So it's going to return all this, okay? Plus, and then finally, grade level. Plus grade level. And then we terminate, and I'm going to compile it to verify that I have no errors. Okay, good. Now, these are called accessor methods or getter methods. Now, they're called that, but they're still just methods. So, I mean, there's really nothing special about them other than that the fact that they let us access the value of these instance variables. Notice how these variables are declared private, and so I cannot access these variables outside of the class directly. I need a public method that returns to that variable right here. I also, just for the sake of trying to make this a little more concise, I also have the ToString method. This is a special method, and I guess special within double quotes, because it is also just another method. So there's, I mean, nothing functionality wise, there's nothing special about it. It still does what a typical method does. What's special about it is the name, ToString. Now what's true is that every class that you make, every class has a ToString method. You don't see it, but it's there, hidden. And what I'm doing here is I'm replacing that ToString method with this ToString method. So whatever the ToString method used to return in the past, which is typically some sort of memory address that makes no sense to us, coding it right here overwrites the implicit ToString method. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test this. And so if I make a student and we call him Emi, short for Emiliano, and we say, okay, I want this new student, and this is where I need to match whatever I wrote in my constructor. The constructor requires 1, 2, 3 arguments: a string, an integer, and another string. And so I'll give it here a different name instead. It doesn't matter. Call it Jeff. And so I need 3 arguments, 2 strings, and then an integer in the middle. And so Jeff Lopez, that's the first argument. This is going to be stored in the variable n. That's the first parameter. They match up. And then what the constructor does, the student constructor, it says that name, which is the variable up here, the instance variable, is equal to n. And n is Jeff Lopez. Jeff Lopez is 16 years of age. Again, this is an integer, whole number. It matches, it's the second argument. It matches up with the second parameter here, an int a. And so a is going to be 16, and age is going to equal whatever a is, which is 16. And then finally, senior. Jeff is a senior. So the third parameter here is a string. It's going to be this, or I guess third argument. Right here, they're called arguments. It's what you're sending. And what you receive over here is a parameter. These are parameters, they're variables. G is going to be senior. Grade level is going to equal whatever G is. And so this is going to be made equal to senior. Now, you do this, we compile, and we should be good. And then I run, and I'll see that nothing happens. I don't see anything, but there's stuff that happened in the background here. Okay, Jeff Lopez, a new student was made. The name of the student is Jeff, or I guess the name of the object. The student object is Jeff, and we gave it a name, Jeff Lopez 16 and senior. And you can do this, you can continue doing this. You can say, I want another student called Carlos. This is a new student. And Carlos, what's his last name? Gonzalez is 17. And this he's also a senior, which actually, if I guess, for us, this is probably something like a junior. Okay, now notice the different, I give them different names because they're different student objects. I don't have to call him Jeff, I can call him student A and student B. It doesn't make a difference. This is where the substance of the student is coming from. And so we've made a student, and I'm going to compile and run. Again, I don't see anything because I'm not printing anything. Now let's print something. Let's say I want to print from student A. I want to get the name of that student. Remember, get name is a method that retrieves the name of the student A. Again, that corresponds to this getter method, get name. Now don't let how I coded it confuse you. This is the same as doing the following. It's the exact same thing. Java doesn't care about white space. So it's the same thing, same functionality, but I save myself some space if I just keep it as I had. So return the name. And so what happens here is I'm going to print what get name returns for student A. And if I run this and I compile and run, I get Jeff Lopez. And then you could say, okay, well, I don't want to just print the name of student A. I also want to print the student's age and their grade level. You would have to do something like copy this. And you'd say for student A, also get age. That's another method. And also for student A, get grade level, which let me see exactly how I type that. Get grade level. I'm just going to copy it like that. And I'm going to compile and I'm going to run. And you see you have Jeff Lopez 16 and a junior. Now, what I can do instead is I can say I want to print all the information for student B, but I don't want to have to access every individual method. And that's where the ToString method comes into play. I can say I'm gonna print, so I'll just copy this, and then I can say, instead of saying b.getName and then getAge, I just want to print b.ToString. Print what the ToString method returns. And so you go down here, the ToString method returns this string, name plus age. And so I should see all the information for student B. And notice the difference here. For student B, it's a little more neat. And what's true is that for any object, whether it's a student or any other class that you have, we've worked on a number of different classes. Let's see what comes to mind. I can't recall right now, but we've done a few, and even in my other videos, we've coded a number of different classes. So we have two students, A and B, and this is their information. And for any object, just simply printing the object. So instead of doing this, just printing print B. B is a student. So if you print this without putting ToString method, it's the same thing as printing b.ToString, meaning the computer knows what to print. When you just print the object, it prints whatever's in the ToString method. So they're equivalent. Now, if you made it a third student and you said something like, I want to, student C here is Alex, what's his last name? I'm just making up, really. And this student is 15 years old and is older freshman. And I say, okay, I want to just print student C, but I don't want to have to access every method, every getter method. I just want to print that student. And it prints its information right here. Alex Herrera, age 15, freshman. Now let's get to what I want to really talk about, which is arrays and array lists. Just like you can make arrays, and this is how we make an array. This is just for an example, and numbers. And we're gonna make an array that has integers in it. I'm gonna hard code these values right now instead of trying to put the numbers one at a time. I just made these numbers up. There you go. That's what an array looks like. Numbers, it has these numbers, and then if you want to print the numbers in the array, you would do print, I want to print the first number in my array, so that would be numbers of 0. And then I want to print the second number in my array. Well, that would have to be numbers of 1. And these are called the index values, 0, 1. There's 4 numbers, so you'd say, you'd basically go all the way up to 3, 2, and then 3, right? And if I compile and I run, notice the numbers, it doesn't print 0, 1, 2, and 3. It prints whatever is at location 0 of the array numbers, which is 5. And then at location 1, I have 6. And then location 2, I have 7, and so on and so forth. Indexing in an array always starts at 0. So this is the 0th element, first element, second element, third element. What's different from an array? Well, I guess let me stop there for a minute. Now let's say that you want to make an array that has students in it. Well, you can do that. You're not restricted to just storing numbers or decimal values. You can put objects. And so I would do something like this. This is a little different. I'm going to initialize it a little different. I would do, well, let me try. I don't know if this is going to work, if I'm being completely honest. Let's see if I can hard code it. C, there's 3 students. And what I'm going to do here is instead of having integers, I'm going to have a student. an array of students like that. Let's see if this works. Numbers of numbers of last of students. Oh, it's because I got rid of the numbers of the name. Works. Okay. Let me get rid of this already because we're past that. Okay. So let's say that you want a list of students, and let's call it maybe list of students instead. I hope that doesn't have an issue with this, but we'll see. It doesn't. Okay, so this is what happened. We now made a list. So instead of just having one student, we have the square brackets to signify an array of students. And we have them, we just hard-coded them to student A, B, and C. How would you add a fourth student? Well, you could do something like this, okay? Well, I'm going to try it out because I think in the past I may have butchered this, but we'll see. Well, let's make a new student right here, and we'll call this new student Nick. And he is, I don't know why they're all males, by the way, but that's okay. Junior. This works, okay? If you want to add a new student, you have to use this format, which is exactly what you have here. And so you have now a list of students that has student objects in them. And then I have, okay, A, B, C, and then a new student, right? You need to follow this format if you want to add a new student. And then if I want to print that student, but you know that there's a better way of printing. We can use a for loop or a ForEach loop. Let me use a ForEach loop first. For each student, X in, notice the colon means you can read it as in my list, a list of students. All we want to do is print X. So this is a for each loop that what it does is it basically prints every student. X is like a temporary variable. X is going to be every student in my list. And so the first value of X is going to be student A, which is up here, Jeff Lopez. And then X is going to be student B, that's Carlos. And then X is going to be student C, which is Alex. And then X is going to be this new student. We can also use a regular for loop. Now, what's true about a list, or what's different from a list and an array list, is that in an array list, you can add students right here. I hard-coded this right here at the very top. After I put all these students in my list, there's 4 of them: student A, student B, student C, and this new student. Then after I put all those students in my list, I cannot add any more students. That's it. List of students is only going to have 4 students and no more ever. Let me show you how we do an array list. We say array list, and then we need these angled brackets, and right here we specify what is going to be in our list. Well, it's going to have a student. Notice that it's singular, okay? That's because that's singular and it comes straight from the name here. So not students, plural, just one student. My list is going to have students in it. You give the list, you give it a name, and we can call it something like, I don't know. You can make a class, for example, a geometry. The students in my geometry class. Now, I am going to declare it as you would without hard coding, because right here I've hard coded my students, okay? I would say a new array list of student, and then we have a set of parentheses here where we could in theory specify the size but we don't need to. Like if we put 3, that means that there's going to be 3 students in my list. But because an array list allows you to add students as you go, then maybe initializing a certain number of students is not ideal or necessary. And so geometry is a list. Now let's say I want to add a student to my list. I can say, okay, geometry, I'm going to take my list. Dot. The way we add students to an array list is different than the way we add students to an array. This is an array. This is an array list. If you were adding students without hard coding, let me show you here. If I said, I know how many students I want 3 students or 2 students. So a list of students is an array and has 2 students in it. And if you wanted to add them one at a time, you'd say list of students. And at the first index location, I'm going to put student A equals. So list of students of 0 equals A. And then I would do something very similar where I would say, I know I only have 2 students. So at location 1, I want another student, maybe student C. So you put equals right here. You specify the name of the list, the index location where you want to add the student, and then equals a student. And so right here we're printing that. Now for geometry, for my geometry, which is an array list, not just an array, it does still have student objects in it. The way I add students is I use the add method, geometry.add, and you could add here student B, for example. And then if you wanted to add more students, you do geometry.add. And let's say we want to make a new student right away, right here, just new student. We give it a name. Let's think here of a girl name, right? I think it's appropriate. I've had all guys here, so something, I don't know, like Leticia. I'm just making these names up as they go, trying to think of people I may know. And she is 18 and she is soon to graduate. She's a senior. Notice I need to balance my parentheses. Those are balanced, and then these 2 are balanced, right? And so right now, geometry only has 2 students in it, but you could keep adding and adding. And so there's the key difference between an array and, well, I should say an array and an array list. So some key differences. There's a lot more methods with array lists that let you add and remove. Again, let me clarify here. List of students is only ever going to have 2 students and no more than that. That's it. Just 2 students. That doesn't mean you can't change the students. You can say the first student is student A, and then the second student is student C. But later down the road, you could potentially replace student A with student B. Something like this afterwards. Somewhere down the road in your code, you could put here, you could say, okay, well, I printed the elements, but now I want my first student to not be student A, to be student B. So you can replace, but you're never going to have more than 2 students or less. It's always going to have 2 students. Whereas an array list, you give it a name, you tell it what it's going to have. It's going to have a student in it. Then you could specify the size of the list. So maybe 10, right? Maybe 10 students. And so it holds enough space for 10 students, but that doesn't mean you can't go past 10 or have less than 10. And that's why we typically omit this number, and you just add students as you go. Now, if I want to print the students in my geometry list, I can do it the same way I did it right here. I can say for each student X in my list, which is geometry, print x. I need to import the appropriate library. So when we use ArrayList, we need to import java.util.ArrayList. Okay, there we go. And so understand that right now we have student A and student C in an array of students, whereas we have student B and this new student, Leticia Ortiz, in an array list called geometry. And it prints all the same. Now suppose that you only want to print the names of my students in geometry. You're not interested in their grade level and their age. You just want to print their name. Well, you would say for each student X in geometry, here's geometry, it is an array list that has students in it. Instead of printing X, which X is every student, you can say print for each student X, get the name, and print that only. And so you see, and let me just put here a print statement that hopefully clarifies a little bit here. I'm just going to put here some asterisks so that we can clearly see where one print statement ends and the other one begins. And so right here, these are the students in my array, printing X right here, and then these two are the students in my array list, which I'm just going to call it list so that it's not as confusing, okay? This is an array, this is a list. Now I'm going to end the video here, and I am going to keep talking a little bit more about this. There's some problems in the sample for response questions that have to do with array and array lists, and I want to make sure that you are comfortable with them. And so the next video I post is going to provide a little more explanation, but again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.